The abandoned research station hung like a ghost in the permanent twilight of the Cassini Nebula. Its hull, a patchwork of obsolete alloys and forgotten technologies, drifted silently against the backdrop of swirling cosmic dust. Most salvage teams would have passed it by, another relic of some long-forgotten scientific expedition. But Marcus Reyes was not most salvage team leaders. At 32, Marcus had already developed a reputation among xenorchaeological circles as something of an anomaly. Where his colleagues saw dead ends, he saw mysteries waiting to be unraveled. His team of 5, a motley crew of researchers, engineers, and explorers, represented humanity's best and brightest misfits. They were underfunded, slightly crazy, and possessed an infectious enthusiasm that bordered on the miraculous. The station's external sensors showed no signs of life, but Marcus knew better. Years of experience had taught him that silence often meant something extraordinary was waiting to be discovered. As the salvage ship's docking clamps engaged with the station's primary airlock, a subtle vibration ran through the hull. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the team's quantum physicist, raised an eyebrow. "Something feels off," she muttered, her fingers dancing across her datapad. "The electromagnetic readings are unusual." Marcus grinned. Unusual was good. Unusual meant interesting. The airlock groaned with the weight of centuries, its mechanisms fighting against accumulated dust and micrometeor impacts. Standard protocol dictated a full decontamination and remote scanning before entry, but Marcus had never been one to follow standard protocols. "Suit up," he called to the team. "We're going in." The station's interior was a labyrinth of frozen corridors and dark chambers. Frost-like crystals of accumulated atmospheric condensation covered every surface, creating an ethereal landscape of scientific abandonment. Emergency lighting flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Dr. Camille Ahmed, the team's xenolinguist, swept his specialized scanner across the walls. "These markings," he murmured, "they're not like anything in our databases. Multiple linguistic signatures overlapping, almost like a conversation frozen in time." Marcus moved deeper into the station, his intuition pulling him forward. Something about this place felt different. Most abandoned research stations were clinical, sterile. This one felt alive. Not with biological life, but with potential, with secrets. The central research chamber was a cathedral of scientific mystery. Massive data storage units lined the walls, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. And there, sitting almost casually on a central pedestal, were the data crystals. They were unlike any artifact the team had ever encountered. Approximately the size of a human hand, they appeared to be crafted from a material that defied conventional classification. Not quite crystal, not quite metal, they seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. When Marcus's hand first touched them, something extraordinary happened. The crystals pulsed, not with electricity or any measurable energy signature, but with a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Elena's instruments went wild, recording quantum fluctuations that should have been impossible. Camille's linguistic scanners began producing fragments of text in languages that had never been fully translated. "This is impossible," Elena whispered, her scientific skepticism battling with pure wonder. Marcus felt something else, a connection, a sense that these crystals were more than just an artifact. They were a message, a challenge, an invitation. "Pack them up," he said, his voice steady. "We're taking everything." Little did they know that their discovery would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the entire understanding of humanity's place in the universe. The data crystals were not just a discovery. They were a key. And keys, by their very nature, are meant to unlock something extraordinary. The grand pavilion of interstellar commerce gleamed like a crystal cathedral suspended in the void of space. Diplomatic vessels from across the known galaxy converged, their hulls reflecting the light of 1,000 artificial suns. This was the Galactic Auction, an event that occurred once every solar century, where the most extraordinary discoveries were traded among the universe's most powerful civilizations. Marcus and his team stood out like vibrant brushstrokes on a monochromatic canvas, while other delegations arrived in rigid formations, wearing elaborate ceremonial attire that spoke of millennia-old traditions. The humans looked almost casual. Alina's quantum analysis equipment was strapped to her back, like a well-worn backpack. Camille adjusted his translator with the ease of someone changing a casual accessory. And Marcus wore an ancient leather jacket that looked like it had seen more adventures than most species had existence. The Vornax delegation arrived first, a crystalline species that communicated through intricate light patterns and electromagnetic pulses. Their representative, Grand Negotiator Shirak, was a towering being of translucent blue crystal that shifted and refracted light with every movement. Historically, the Vornax had dominated these auctions, their negotiation techniques rendering most other species speechless. Interesting. Shirak's translator crackled, its tone a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed condescension. Humans, we did not expect your species to participate this cycle. Marcus stepped forward, a datapad containing preliminary scans of the crystals casually held in his hand. We're full of surprises, he responded, a slight smile playing on his lips. The auction floor was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Holographic displays showcased various artifacts, some so advanced they seemed to defy the laws of physics, others so ancient they predated most known civilizations. But today, all attention was focused on the data crystals recovered from the abandoned research station. The Kyrian Collective arrived next, a hive mind species that processed information through a complex neural network. Their representative was not an individual, but a floating cluster of interconnected biomechanical nodes that hummed with collective intelligence. Where the Vornax were elegant, the Kyrian were precise. Where other species saw complexity, they saw patterns. Preliminary analysis suggests anomalous quantum entanglement. The Kyrian Collective announced, their voice a harmonized chorus. The artifacts defy our computational models. Alina leaned close to Marcus. They're scared, she whispered. They just don't know it yet. The auction began with a formality that felt almost ritualistic. Each species presented their initial bid, not just in currency, but in technological trade, strategic alliances, and complex multidimensional negotiations that would make human diplomacy look like a children's game. The Vornax made the first substantial offer, a complete star mapping technology that could revolutionize faster than light travel. The Kyrian Collective countered with a proposal of shared computational resources that represented centuries of accumulated knowledge. Marcus watched and waited. When he finally stepped forward, the entire pavilion went silent. The humans had been largely ignored in previous auctions, considered technological infants in a universe of ancient civilizations. But something in Marcus's demeanor suggested something different. We're not here to sell, Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the complex diplomatic noise. We're here to discuss. The statement was so unexpected that for a moment, every species, every translator, every collective intelligence, every sophisticated negotiation algorithm simply stopped. The game had changed, and nobody quite understood how yet. The cryptographic challenge began in a sealed chamber that hummed with more computational power than most planets could generate. Representatives from 6 different galactic civilizations watched through multi-dimensional viewing portals, their collective anticipation thick enough to cut with a quantum knife. Marcus assembled his team like a chess grandmaster positioning pieces. Alina Rodriguez stood at the primary interface, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that seemed to breathe with living code. Beside her, Camille Ahmed worked his linguistic magic, breaking down the crystal's complex patterns into something resembling communication. These aren't just coordinates, Camille muttered, his eyes reflecting streams of impossible symbols. They're a language. No, multiple languages layered on top of each other. It's like someone wrote a novel using the DNA of different books. The Kyrian Collective's computational nodes began their attack on the crystal's encryption. Trillion processor networks launched mathematical assaults that had cracked entire civilizational secrets in microseconds. But these crystals were different. Each algorithmic approach was met with a response that seemed to shift the very foundation of the problem. Elena watched in fascination. The crystals weren't just resisting decryption. They were actively playing with the decryption attempts. Where a traditional system would block or fail, these artifacts seemed to create elaborate puzzles that changed the moment they were approached. "It's adaptive," she whispered to Marcus. "The encryption isn't static. It's alive." The Vornax delegation grew visibly agitated. Their lead cryptographer, a being of pure mathematical precision, began to show the first signs of what could only be described as frustration. Crystalline structures that typically represented calm began to show micro-fractures of uncertainty. Marcus understood something the other species didn't. This wasn't about breaking a code. It was about understanding a conversation. "Stop," he said suddenly, causing every being in the chamber to freeze. "We're approaching this wrong." The human team began to work differently. Where other species used linear computational approaches, they'd brought something unprecedented: creativity. Camel started mapping linguistic patterns, treating the encryption like a complex language. Elena approached it as a quantum problem of observation and possibility. Their third team member, Dr. Aisha Nakamura, a specialist in adaptive systems, began looking at the crystal as a living system rather than a static object. Their approach was chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable chaos. Lines of code began to resolve not through brute force, but through intuitive leaps. Patterns emerged that defied traditional mathematical models. The crystal seemed to respond, not as a passive object, but as something approaching communication. "It's testing us," Marcus realized. "This isn't just encryption. It's a challenge." The Galactic Consortium's observers began to whisper. Humans were supposed to be newcomers, technological children. But here they were doing something no other civilization had managed in millennia. Suddenly, a breakthrough. Not through overwhelming computational power, but through a moment of creative insight that came from nowhere and everywhere. A holographic projection erupted from the crystal. Not data, not coordinates, but something that looked like a map. No, more than a map. A network. A complex, living network of connections that seemed to pulse with potential. The chamber went silent. The Kyrian Collective's computational nodes began to vibrate. The Vornax representative's crystalline form showed hairline fractures of pure astonishment. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of an ancient game, and they were just getting started. The diplomatic chambers of the Galactic Consortium were a labyrinth of tension and unspoken threats. Holographic displays flickered with centuries of established protocols, intricate webs of alliances that had maintained a delicate balance of power for millennia. And now, humanity was about to tear it all apart. Marcus understood diplomacy as an art form, not a science. Where other species saw rigid negotiation structures, he saw a living, breathing ecosystem of relationships and possibilities. His team had become something more than just researchers. They were now the most unpredictable variable in galactic politics. The emergency session convened with representatives from 12 major galactic civilizations. The Vornax delegation occupied a crystalline platform that shifted and refracted light with every minute movement. The Kyrian Collective's representatives formed a floating neural network that hummed with collective intelligence. Ancient species that had watched civilizations rise and fall now found themselves completely off balance. The human discovery threatens the fundamental framework of our existing galactic treaties, announced Arbiter Shulik of the Centaur Confederation, his multifaceted eyes reflecting a mixture of anger and fear. They cannot be allowed to continue their current trajectory. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her datapad displaying a complex series of quantum interactions that seemed to dance between mathematical precision and artistic expression. "Threats?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. "We're offering an opportunity." The diplomatic maneuver was breathtaking in its simplicity and complexity. Marcus and his team began strategically leaking information, not complete data, but tantalizing fragments that forced each galactic power to reconsider their position. A communication protocol here, a partial coordinate system there, each piece designed to create maximum confusion and minimum clarity. Camille Ahmed worked his linguistic magic behind the scenes. He understood something profound about communication that most species missed. Language was never just about words. It was about context, intention, and the spaces between understanding. The Vornax attempted their traditional diplomatic pressure. Electromagnetic pulses designed to intimidate and control human representatives washed over the team like gentle waves. Marcus simply smiled, a gesture so human and so incomprehensible that it momentarily short-circuited the alien negotiation algorithms. "We're not asking for permission," Marcus announced during a critical moment of negotiation. "We're inviting collaboration." It was a statement so radical, so completely outside the established diplomatic frameworks, that several alien representatives momentarily lost their collective composure. The Kyrian collective's neural network flickered. The Vornax crystalline structures showed micro-fractures of uncertainty. Dr. Aisha Nakamura began presenting a series of potential collaborative scenarios. Each projection was a masterpiece of strategic imagination. Where traditional diplomatic proposals would offer incremental advantages, her presentation suggested fundamental transformations of existing galactic relationships. The human team wasn't just negotiating. They were reimagining the entire concept of interspecies cooperation. Behind the scenes, a complex game was being played. Each leaked fragment of information, each strategic presentation, was carefully designed to create maximum uncertainty among the established powers. The Galactic Consortium had always relied on predictability. Humanity was introducing a new element: beautiful, terrifying unpredictability. As the diplomatic session reached its crescendo, it became clear that something fundamental had changed. The humans weren't just participants in the galactic community anymore. They were becoming architects of a new possibility. And nobody, not a single representative in that vast, complex chamber, knew exactly what would happen next. The research facility orbited a neutron star, its massive containment fields shimmering like liquid starlight. Here, at the bleeding edge of human technological innovation, the true nature of the data crystals began to reveal itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic projection that defied everything scientific understanding had previously believed possible. The transportation network revealed by the crystals was not just a method of travel. It was a living system of cosmic interconnectivity that made traditional faster-than-light technology look like children's toy models. "It's not just a network," Elena muttered, her fingers tracing intricate quantum pathways. "It's a conversation." Marcus watched as each breakthrough cascaded into more questions. The research team had grown, now including specialists from disciplines that had never before worked together. Quantum physicists worked alongside xenolinguists. Computational theorists collaborated with artists and musicians, seeking patterns that pure logic could never uncover. Dr. Camille Ahmed had discovered something extraordinary about the crystal's communication structure. The transportation coordinates were actually a form of language, a complex, multidimensional communication system that changed based on the observer's perspective. Where other species saw fixed data points, humans saw a dynamic, living conversation. The Kyrian collective watched with growing concern. Their most advanced computational systems had been working on the crystal's data for weeks, producing nothing but increasingly complex dead ends. The human approach was maddeningly different. They didn't try to solve the problem. They played with it. Aisha Nakamura's breakthrough came during what seemed like an ordinary research session. She had been studying the crystal's response patterns, treating it less like a technological artifact and more like a living organism. Her background in adaptive systems gave her a unique perspective that no other researcher had considered. "It responds to creativity," she explained to the team. "Not just mathematical precision, but genuine innovative thinking." The transportation network began to take shape, not as a static map, but as a dynamic system that seemed to breathe and evolve. Each breakthrough revealed layers of complexity that challenged fundamental understanding of space, time, and communication. Political representatives from various galactic civilizations watched the research with a mixture of fear and fascination. The humans were doing something impossible. They were transforming a technological discovery into something that defied categorization. Marcus understood the deeper implication. This wasn't just about transportation. This was about connection. The facility became a beacon of innovation. Researchers from different disciplines worked in ways that broke every established scientific protocol. A quantum physicist might suddenly collaborate with a jazz musician, seeking harmonic patterns in the crystal's data. A computational expert would consult with a poet, looking for linguistic rhythms that mathematical models could not detect. Each day brought new revelations. The transportation network was alive in a way no technology had ever been before. It responded, adapted, communicated. It was less a system of travel and more a living network of potential. We're not just discovering technology, Marcus told Elena during one late-night research session. We're learning a new way of understanding the universe. The Galactic Consortium's worst fears were being realized. Humanity wasn't just participating in galactic technology. They were fundamentally reimagining what technology could be. The transportation network represented more than a method of travel. It was a bridge between understanding, a system that celebrated complexity, creativity, and connection. And they were just beginning to understand its true potential. The discovery came not in a moment of grand scientific revelation, but in a quiet research room filled with the soft hum of equipment and the nervous energy of intellectual breakthrough. Marcus stood before a holographic projection that seemed to breathe with possibility, surrounded by his core team and a select group of researchers who had become more than colleagues. They were explorers of the unknown. Dr. Camille Ahmed's linguistic analysis had uncovered something profound. The data crystals were not just a transportation network or a technological marvel. They were a test, a challenge left behind by an ancient civilization that had discovered something fundamental about intelligence itself. It's a filter, Camille explained, his eyes reflecting the dancing holographic patterns. Not a physical barrier, but a conceptual one. They were looking for something specific. Elena Rodriguez's quantum analysis added another layer to the puzzle. The network responded to more than just mathematical precision or technological capability. It responded to something more nuanced, a combination of creativity, collaborative thinking, and the ability to see connections where others saw only chaos. The research facility became a crucible of human potential. Teams worked in configurations that would have been impossible in any other scientific environment. A computational expert might find herself collaborating with a jazz musician, seeking harmonic patterns in the crystal's data. A quantum physicist would consult with a poet, exploring linguistic rhythms that defied traditional scientific models. Marcus understood the deeper implication. This was more than a technological discovery. It was a fundamental test of intelligence itself. The Vornax and Kyrian collective watched with increasing concern. Their most advanced computational systems had been working on the crystal's data for months, producing nothing but increasingly complex dead ends. The human approach was something they could not comprehend, a method of investigation that was part science, part art, and entirely unpredictable. Aisha Nakamura's breakthrough came during a moment of seemingly random inspiration. She had been studying the crystal's response patterns, treating it less like a technological artifact and more like a living organism. Her background in adaptive systems gave her a unique perspective that no other researcher had considered. They're not looking for the most advanced technology, she explained to the team. They're looking for the most adaptive form of intelligence. The ancient civilization that created the crystals had discovered something profound. True intelligence wasn't about raw computational power or technological advancement. It was about the ability to adapt, to see connections, to approach problems from perspectives that defied conventional understanding. Humanity was proving to be exactly what they were searching for. The transportation network began to reveal itself not as a static system, but as a dynamic, living network of potential. Each breakthrough challenged fundamental understanding of space, communication, and the nature of intelligence itself. Marcus gathered the team for a critical meeting. The holographic projections around them showed fragments of the network, complex, beautiful, terrifying in its potential. "We're not just discovering a technology," he said, his voice calm but charged with excitement. "We're being invited to something bigger." The implications were staggering. This was more than a transportation network. It was an invitation, a challenge from an ancient civilization that had found a way to identify and connect with truly innovative intelligence. And humanity had just passed the first test. As the research continued, one thing became increasingly clear. The universe was far more strange, more wonderful, and more full of potential than anyone had ever imagined. And humanity was standing at the threshold of something extraordinary. The confrontation erupted like a supernova of diplomatic tension. The Galactic Consortium's Supreme Council chamber became a battlefield of ideas, with humanity at the epicenter of a conflict that would reshape galactic civilization. Marcus stood at the center of the massive circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from 12 different galactic civilizations. Holographic displays flickered with centuries of accumulated diplomatic protocols, now rendered obsolete by a single human discovery. The Vornax delegation's crystalline forms shifted with agitation, while the Kyrian collective's neural networks hummed with a frequency that suggested pure computational panic. "Your actions threaten the fundamental stability of galactic relations," proclaimed Grand Arbiter Shillik, his multifaceted eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and barely contained rage. "Humanity cannot be allowed to continue this trajectory." Alina Rodriguez stepped forward, her data pad projecting a series of quantum interactions that seemed to dance between mathematical precision and pure artistic expression. "Threaten?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. "We're offering an opportunity for transformation." The human strategy was breathtaking in its complexity and simplicity. They had been strategically leaking information, not complete data, but tantalizing fragments that forced each galactic power to reconsider their entire understanding of technology, communication, and intelligence. Camille Ahmed worked diplomatic magic behind the scenes. He understood something profound about communication that most species missed. Language was never just about words. It was about context, intention, and the spaces between understanding. The Vornax launched their traditional diplomatic pressure. Electromagnetic pulses designed to intimidate and control washed over the human representatives like gentle waves. Marcus simply smiled, a gesture so human and so incomprehensible that it momentarily short-circuited the alien negotiation algorithms. "We're not asking for permission," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the diplomatic noise. "We're inviting collaboration." Aisha Nakamura began presenting a series of potential collaborative scenarios. Each projection was a masterpiece of strategic imagination. Where traditional diplomatic proposals would offer incremental advantages, her presentation suggested fundamental transformations of existing galactic relationships. The attack came unexpectedly. The Galactic Consortium's most powerful members launched a coordinated economic and political assault designed to isolate and neutralize human influence. Trade routes were threatened. Diplomatic channels were severed. Economic sanctions were prepared with surgical precision. But they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity. Each attack was met with a response so creative, so utterly unexpected, that it left the alien powers reeling. The human team turned the consortium's own rules and technologies against them, creating alliances, exploiting bureaucratic weaknesses, and demonstrating a level of adaptive intelligence that was simply incomprehensible to their opponents. Dr. Rodriguez's quantum analysis team began revealing strategic vulnerabilities in the galactic economic system that no one had ever noticed. Camille Ahmed discovered diplomatic back channels that had been dormant for centuries. Marcus orchestrated a diplomatic dance that was part negotiation, part psychological warfare, and entirely unpredictable. The Kyrian collective's computational systems began to overload. Their predictive models, built on millennia of careful calculation, started to break down when confronted with human unpredictability. What should have been a simple elimination of a potential threat had become a complex, multidimensional problem that defied all existing solutions. As the confrontation reached its peak, it became clear that something fundamental had changed. The humans weren't just participants in the galactic community anymore. They were becoming architects of a new possibility. And nobody, not a single representative in that vast, complex chamber, knew exactly what would happen next. The universe watched and waited. The moment of transformation arrived not with a thunderous declaration, but with a quiet revelation that rippled across the galaxy like a whisper of possibility. Marcus stood at the edge of a newly activated transportation gate, the complex network of quantum pathways spreading out before him like an impossible map of connection and potential. Delegates from 12 different galactic civilizations watched in a mixture of terror and awe. The transportation network was no longer just a technological marvel. It had become a living testament to humanity's unique approach to understanding the universe. Dr. Elena Rodriguez completed the final quantum calibrations. The gate hummed with an energy that seemed to breathe, to think, to communicate. Where other species saw a transportation system, humans had discovered something far more profound. A network of potential, of connection, of possibility. It's not just about moving from one point to another, Elena explained to the assembled representatives. It's about how we move, how we connect, how we understand. The Vornax delegation's crystalline representatives shifted nervously. Their most advanced computational systems had failed to unlock the network's full potential. The humans had done what no other civilization had managed in millennia. They had transformed a technological artifact into a living system of communication and potential. Kamil Ahmed's linguistic analysis revealed the deepest secret of the transportation network. It was a conversation, a complex, multidimensional dialogue that responded to creativity, to innovative thinking, to the ability to see connections where others saw only barriers. The first practical demonstration came unexpectedly. A research vessel from a previously isolated planetary system found itself instantly connected to the galactic community, not through force or technological dominance, but through an invitation, a bridge of understanding that defied traditional concepts of distance and communication. Aisha Nakamura's adaptive systems team had discovered something extraordinary. The network wasn't just a method of transportation. It was a filter, a test designed by an ancient civilization to identify and connect with truly innovative intelligence. And humanity had passed that test. The economic and diplomatic implications were staggering. Traditional power structures began to crumble. Species that had been isolated for millennia suddenly found themselves connected. Trade routes that had taken generations to establish could now be traversed in moments. But the true revolution was something far more subtle. The transportation network challenged fundamental understanding of communication, intelligence, and connection. It wasn't about moving physical objects from one point to another. It was about bridging understanding, about creating connections that transcended traditional limitations. Marcus watched as the first truly collaborative mission began to take shape. Researchers from different species worked together in ways that would have been impossible just months before. A Kyrian computational expert might find herself collaborating with a human artist. A Vornax physicist could work alongside a linguist from a previously unknown planetary system. The Galactic Consortium's representatives realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Humanity hadn't just discovered a new technology. They had opened a door to a fundamentally new way of understanding the universe. "We're not conquerors," Marcus said during the final presentation. "We're explorers, collaborators, connectors." As the first wave of transportation gates came online, something became abundantly clear. The universe was far more strange, more wonderful, and more full of potential than anyone had ever imagined. And humanity stood at the threshold of something extraordinary. The network pulsed with possibility, a living, breathing system of connection that celebrated the most fundamental aspect of true intelligence, the ability to see beyond existing limitations, to connect, to understand, to imagine. And they were just getting started.